So this video is a slight detour from my usual content. I figured as Halloween approaches, some Scottish ghost stories might be just the ticket. If you're new to the channel and enjoy the content, please consider subscribing or even saying hello in the comments. We have a wonderful small community here. If you like it, then drop a like. If not, then there's a dislike button also. If this video is well received and does well, I might make it a regular thing, as it was a ton of fun to research, write and record. So, on with the stories. Poltergeists are different from other ghosts. They don't haunt houses, they haunt people. Usually one particular person, often a young person, and they follow that person wherever they go. The word poltergeist comes from German. Poltern means to knock, and geist means spirit. Noisy spirits. They knock, they move objects, they hurl vases from mantels and shove heavy furniture across rooms while witnesses watch in stunned silence. But here's what makes them truly terrifying. Some researchers believe poltergeists aren't ghosts at all. There's something far stranger, a physical manifestation of psychological distress, raw emotion made solid, a child's pain given form and force. And if that's true, then what happened in Sauchie, Scotland back in 1960 is one of the most disturbing cases ever documented. Because when 11-year-old Virginia Campbell moved to Scotland that October, she brought something with her. Something born from loneliness, so profound it could move furniture, throw objects, and make a classroom desk levitate in front of 30 witnesses. This is the story of Wee Hughie, and what he tells us about the power of a child's unhappiness. No one really understood how upset Virginia was. She was 11 years old, the youngest child in her family, the only one still at home after all her brothers and sisters had grown up, found work, started their own families even. Her parents were nearly 60. They lived in rural Ireland, in a kind of remote, isolated place where weeks would pass without seeing anyone outside of the family. Virginia was lonely, desperately lonely. She had one friend, a girl named Annie, and she had one companion who never left her side, her dog, Toby. That was it. That was her entire world outside her ageing parents. Then came the move to Scotland. First, her father had to stay behind to sell the farm, so Virginia and her mother travelled to Sauchie in Clackmannanshire, alone. Second, they weren't moving into their own place. They were staying with Virginia's aunt and uncle in a small house, so small that Virginia had to share a bed with her young cousin Margaret. Thirdly, and perhaps worst of all, Virginia's mother found work in another town, too far to commute, so Mrs. Campbell made the decision to live where she worked during the week, which meant that young Virginia, shy and already isolated, was left in Sauchie with her aunt and uncle's family, in a strange town, sharing a bed with a cousin that she barely knew, starting a new school where she knew absolutely no one. Oh, and Annie, her only friend, well, she was left behind in Ireland. And Toby, her beloved dog, her constant companion, was also left behind. Virginia Campbell, 11 years old, was more alone than she had ever been in her entire life. And that's when the knocking started. Tuesday, November 22nd, 1960, the first night. It's just after 9 PM, Virginia and Margaret have been sent to bed. The house is quiet, that particular stillness of a Scottish winter evening when darkness comes early and settles heavy. Virginia's aunt and uncle are sitting downstairs in the living room when they hear the girls call out. "There's a noise up here." "Go to sleep, girls," Mr. Campbell calls back. "It's just your imagination." A few minutes pass. Then both girls come rushing down the stairs, and as they descend, a sound follows them. A rhythmic thunking, like a rubber ball bouncing down each step. The girls burst into the living room, and the sound stops. Everyone just stands there, confused. The aunt and uncle exchange glances. Are these girls playing a trick? Testing boundaries in a new living situation? Back to bed, now. The girls trudge upstairs and their aunt and uncle wait a few moments before checking in on them. They open the bedroom door quietly, expecting to catch the girls giggling or perhaps hiding whatever was making that noise. Instead, They hear it themselves. Coming from behind the headboard of the bed where both girls lay, wide-eyed and terrified. "Right," says Mr. Campbell, trying to sound calmer than he actually feels. "You'll sleep in the other bedroom tonight. This room's making funny sounds. It's nothing to worry about." They move the girls to another bedroom, tuck them into a different bed, and close the door. 5 minutes later, the knocking starts again. Behind the new headboard. This time it continues until Virginia falls asleep. The moment she drifts off, it stops. The next night the knocking returns. This time it's louder, more insistent. Margaret runs from the bedroom terrified, but the knocking doesn't stop there. It actually seems to get louder once Margaret is gone, as if whatever's making this noise is focused entirely on Virginia. Virginia's aunt and uncle are beginning to panic now. This isn't a simple prank. This isn't the house settling on its own. This is something they cannot explain. So they call Reverend T.W. Lund, a local minister. He arrives shortly after midnight and makes his way upstairs. Before he even enters the bedroom, he can hear it. Loud, deliberate knocking coming from Virginia's room. He steps inside and Virginia is laying in bed with her eyes wide open, looking exhausted and terrified. Mr. Lund approaches the bed, studying the headboard. It doesn't touch the wall, so there's a clear gap. So the knocking isn't coming from the wall or from any pipes or anything structural. It's coming from the headboard itself. "Virginia," he says gently, "I need you to move down the bed for me. Put your head away from the headboard." She complies. She slides down the bed until her head is well clear of the wood. The knocking continues, exactly as before. Mr. Lund places one hand on the headboard and one hand on the wall. When the next knock comes, only the headboard vibrates. He can feel it thrumming under his palm. The wall is completely still. And that's when the linen chest moves. It's large, it's heavy, the kind that you need two people to lift, sitting near Virginia's bed. As Mr. Lund watches, it begins to rock back and forth. Then it rises slightly off the floor and starts moving toward the bed, jerking along the floorboards. It moves about 18 inches before it comes to an abrupt stop. Then it moves back to its original position. Mr. Lund stares at it, then at Virginia, who started to cry. "Well," he says, trying to inject some lightness into the situation, "perhaps you have an admirer, Virginia. Maybe it's a boy knocking to get your attention. Perhaps you should knock back." He talks to her for a while, trying to calm her down. Eventually, he suggests that Margaret should get back into bed with Virginia so neither girl has to sleep alone. The moment he says it, the knocking returns, loud, angry, insistent, as if to say, "No, Margaret is not welcome in this bed." Margaret uses another bed in the same room instead. The knocking stops immediately, and both girls, exhausted, finally fall asleep. Friday, November 25th. The school. By that Friday, Virginia has missed 3 days of school. Her aunt and uncle kept her home, thinking that she was far too distressed to attend. But life has to continue, so Virginia returns to class. That afternoon, when she comes home, Mr. Lund is back visiting again. "How was school, Virginia?" "All right," she says, matter-of-factly, "but something funny happened. When my teacher was standing near my desk, the lid of another desk went up all by itself." All by itself. She says it like it's nothing, like desk lids opening by themselves is just another Tuesday. But when researcher A.R.G. Owen later interviewed Miss Margaret Stewart, Virginia's teacher, he got a very different picture of what happened in that classroom that day. Miss Stewart noticed it first around mid-morning. Virginia was sitting at her desk, both hands flat on top of the desk's surface, when the lid began to rise and fall, up and down, 3 times in total. Virginia appeared to be struggling against it, pushing down, trying to keep it closed, but it kept on rising. Miss Stewart moved closer, checking to see maybe if Virginia was using her knees to lift the desk from below. She wasn't. Their eyes met. Miss Stewart gave Virginia a look. That's enough. Virginia stared back silently. 15 minutes later, the girl who sat behind Virginia asked permission to return a library book and left her seat. Her desk was now empty. As Miss Stewart watched, the empty desk began to rise, slowly, steadily, until it was a full inch off the floor. It hovered there for several seconds, then it gently lowered itself back down. Miss Stewart rushed over to the desk, checking for strings, for wires, for anything that could explain what she had just seen. But there was nothing. Just a normal school desk that had, moments before, levitated in a room full of children, though none of the other students had noticed. To cover her obvious distress, Miss Stewart turned to Virginia. "Are you feeling better, Virginia?" "Oh, there's nothing wrong with me, Miss Stewart," Virginia replied. 3 days later, Virginia approached Miss Stewart's desk that morning. As she did, a blackboard pointer sitting on the desk began to vibrate. Then it started moving across the surface, sliding toward the edge until it fell off onto the floor with a clatter. Miss Stewart touched her desk and it too was vibrating. She could feel it humming beneath her fingertips. Then the desk itself began to move, rotating slowly counterclockwise, pushing away from her. She looked at Virginia, who was still standing several feet away, and Virginia burst into tears. "Please, miss," she sobbed. "I am not doing it. I am not doing this." "It's all right, dear. Just help me straighten up the desk." The real heartbreak came one evening when Dr. Logan, the local physician, stopped by to check on Virginia. He brought along his dog. Virginia's face lit up when she saw the animal, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her in weeks. "Oh my gosh, he looks just like Toby," she exclaimed, dropping to her knees to pet the dog. She played with Dr. Logan's dog for nearly half an hour before he had to leave. That night, after Virginia had gone to bed, something happened that revealed the true source of her distress. She went into a trance. Her eyes closed, but she wasn't asleep. She began calling out, not in her normal voice, but in something desperate and broken. "Toby, Toby, where are you? Annie, Annie, don't leave me." Mr. Lund was visiting at the time. In an attempt to comfort her, he gave Virginia a teddy bear, thinking perhaps that it would maybe substitute for her lost dog. For a brief moment, Virginia cuddled the bear, holding it close. Then her fingers found a button on its front. "This isn't Toby," she screamed, and hurled the bear across the room. Still in her trance, eyes closed, she began flailing her arms. She struck out blindly, hitting Mr. Lund. Her aunt and uncle quickly ushered him out of the room. Within minutes, the trance had ended, and Virginia fell into a deep, quiet sleep. By the 1st of December, the Socky poltergeist had become national news. The papers were full of it. Everyone in town knew about the strange happenings at the Campbell house. On December 1st, Mr. Lund and 3 other ministers decided to perform a service of intercession in Virginia's bedroom. A religious ceremony meant to provide comfort and perhaps drive away whatever was tormenting the girl. Mr. Lund brought a tape recorder to document the 15-minute service. During the service, knocking and scraping sounds could be heard on the recording, but something changed that night. The poltergeist activity didn't stop completely, but it became much less frequent, much less violent. Virginia started to settle in at school. She made a friend, a girl named Elizabeth Brown. And then Virginia did something remarkable. She gave the poltergeist a name. Wee Huey. Over the next few months, a dish moved or something went missing. Virginia and Margaret would blame it on Wee Huey. Sometimes with a smile, sometimes even laughing about it. Wee Huey took my candy. Wee Huey moved my book. By March 1961, Toby the dog had been reunited with Virginia, and just like that, the poltergeist activity ceased completely. Wee Huey was finally gone. Here's what the Socky poltergeist teaches us. Virginia Campbell was 11 years old, torn from everything she knew and loved. Her father was gone, her mother was gone, her best friend also gone. Her dog was gone. She was in a strange place, sleeping in a strange bed with a cousin that she barely knew, attending a school where she knew literally no one. She was so lonely and it hurt her. That loneliness, that profound psychological distress manifested physically. It knocked on headboards, it moved furniture, it lifted desks in front of a classroom full of witnesses. When Virginia started to feel safe again, when she made a friend, and when Toby came back, well, that's when Wee Huey disappeared. because wee Hughie was Virginia. Her pain given form, her isolation made real. The Socky poltergeist is proof that the scariest things aren't always supernatural. Sometimes they're just the invisible wounds that we carry. Sometimes a child's unhappiness is powerful enough to move objects, to knock, to scream without sound, to say, "I'm here, I'm hurting. Someone please notice me." And in Virginia's case, someone finally did. Christmas and ghost stories. To us that seems like an odd pairing. We associate Christmas with joy, with presents, with family gathered round tables laden with food. Ghost stories, well, they belong to Halloween, surely, to October nights and carved pumpkins. But the Victorians knew better. They understood that Christmas, for all its warmth and celebration, was also a time of reflection, a time to remember those who were no longer at the table, a time when the veil between the living and the dead felt just that bit thinner, when long winter nights and flickering firelight made the supernatural seem closer. Charles Dickens understood this. His A Christmas Carol is the most famous Christmas ghost story ever told, and Edinburgh helped inspire it. In 1841, Dickens visited this city and wandered through the Canongate churchyard. There, he found a gravestone bearing the name Ebenezer Scroggie, identified as a mealman, a corn merchant, but Dickens misread it, and he thought it was a mean man, and that mistake haunted him enough to create Ebenezer Scrooge. Edinburgh has that effect on people. The city remembers, its stones hold stories, and sometimes, on certain nights, those stories become visible. This is the tale of what happened on Rutland Street on Christmas Eve morning in 1887, when a respected Edinburgh physician saw something that would shake his understanding of life, death, and the bonds that tie us together. This is the story of Dr. W.A. Jameson and the patient who came to say goodbye. Rutland Street, West End, December 24th, 1887. Rutland Street sits in Edinburgh's elegant West End, part of the Newtown expansion, built to embody Georgian ideals of order, refinement and modernity. Wide streets, grand stone facades, a world away from the medieval chaos of the old town. By 1887, it's a desirable address, home to professionals, to Edinburgh's growing middle class, physicians, lawyers, merchants, people of standing and reputation. Dr. W.A. Jameson lives at number 35. He's a respected doctor, rational, educated, not given to flights of fancy or superstition. His days are filled with house calls, consultations, the endless work of tending to Edinburgh's sick and injured. One of his patients is a woman he knows only as Mrs. G, a middle-aged lady suffering from a serious illness. He's been attending to her for weeks now, watching as her condition deteriorates. There's nothing more that he can do medically, it's just a matter of time. On Christmas Eve of 1887, that time runs out, but Dr. Jameson doesn't know that yet. 7:30 a.m. Christmas Eve morning. The room is still dark when Dr. Jameson awakes. Dawn is just beginning, that grey, uncertain light filtering through partially closed shutters. The house is quiet. His wife sleeps beside him. Outside, snow is falling during the night, muffling the sounds of the city. He's awake, but he hasn't yet risen, just laying there in that drowsy place between sleep and full consciousness. That's when he sees her, a figure at the foot of his bed. A woman, medium height, dressed simply, not elaborately, not in anything that would make her stand out. She's just there. She's moving slowly, deliberately, not walking exactly, but gliding across the wooden floor towards him, silent as the snow falling outside. Dr. Jameson raises himself slightly onto his elbows, his eyes following the figure as it approaches. The woman doesn't look at him directly. Her gaze is fixed on something, or someone, beyond him. But as she draws nearer, he recognises her. It's Mrs. G, his patient. He blinks, confusion flooding through him. What is she doing in my bedroom? How did she get into the house? She's gravely ill. She shouldn't even be out of bed, much less walking through Edinburgh in the early morning darkness. He reaches out instinctively. The doctor in him wants to help, to steady her. His hand passes through empty air, and in that moment he realises what he's seeing isn't physical, isn't real in any way. Solid things are real. But she is there, standing right beside his bed, so close that he can touch her, if there was anything solid to touch. Then, as quickly and silently as she appeared, the figure begins to fade, growing fainter, more transparent, like morning mist burning away in the sunlight. Within seconds, she's gone. Dr. Jameson sits bolt upright in bed, heart hammering, breath coming fast. His wife stirs beside him. "What is it?" she asks sleepily. "What's wrong?" He struggles to find words. "I saw Mrs. G. She was here, in our room." Mrs. Jameson is more awake now, concerned. "Wait, what do you mean? Was it a dream?" "No," his voice is firm. "Not a dream. I was fully awake. She was here, standing beside the bed. I reached out to her, but..." Then he trails off, looking at his empty hand. His wife watches him with growing concern. She'd woken to find him sitting upright, staring intently at something that she couldn't see. She'd watched him follow something with his eyes through the room, watched his hand reach out and stop midair as if encountering an invisible barrier. "You're absolutely certain you were awake?" she asks gently. "Completely certain." He glances at the clock on the mantel. 7:30 in the morning. Dr. Jameson can't shake this experience off. He dresses quickly, barely touches his breakfast. Something is wrong. He knows it with the certainty that comes from years of medical practice. Something's happened to Mrs. G. By mid-morning, he's made up his mind. He needs to call on her household, check on her condition, and make sure she's what? Alive? The thought chills him. He arrives at Mrs. G's residence to find the house quiet. Too quiet. The curtains are drawn, the staff move about with subdued, careful movements, the particular hush that fills a house where death has recently visited. Mrs. G's husband meets him at the door. His face says everything before his words do. "Doctor," he says quietly, "I'm afraid she's passed this morning at 7:30. The world seems to tilt. 7:30. The exact moment that Dr. Jameson saw the apparition standing beside his bed. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Jameson manages. She was a remarkable woman." He doesn't mention what he saw. Well, not yet at least. Not now. Not in this moment of fresh grief. But later, when the death certificate is filed, it records Mrs. G's time of death as 7:55 a.m. A slight discrepancy from what the husband had originally reported. Medical bureaucracy perhaps. A delay in recording that exact moment. But Dr. Jameson knows what time she died. 7:30 in the morning. Because she came to tell him. In the days following Christmas, Dr. Jameson can't stop replaying this encounter. He confides in his wife again and again. She was just standing there," he tells her one evening as they sit by the fire. "Clear as day. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a shadow, it was her. I don't understand how or why, but I know what I saw." Mrs. Jameson listens patiently, holding his hand. "I believe you, dear. I honestly believe you. You're not a man giving to fancy. If you say you saw her, then you know what? You saw her." But belief doesn't bring understanding. Dr. Jameson begins to research. He speaks with his colleagues, cautiously, not wanting to damage his professional reputation. He reads accounts of similar experiences, and eventually he contacts the Society for Psychical Research. The SPR, founded just 5 years earlier in 1882, is dedicated to investigating supernatural and paranormal phenomena using scientific methods. They're conducting a massive study called the Census of Hallucinations, collecting accounts from witnesses all across Britain. Dr. Jameson writes a detailed letter describing his experience. Everything, the time, the appearance of the figure, his wife's corroboration, the matching time of death. Professor Henry Sidgwick, one of the SPR's founders, interviews him personally. Were you unwell that morning? Sidgwick asks. No, in perfect health. Okay, how about emotionally distressed? Well, no, not particularly. I mean, I knew Mrs. G was gravely ill, but I'm a physician. Death is part of my profession. I wasn't in any heightened emotional state. And you're certain you were fully awake? Absolutely certain. I'd been awake for several minutes before the apparition appeared. Sidgwick makes careful notes. What stands out in your case, Dr. Jameson, he says finally, is your unwavering clarity. You don't waver in your recollection. You present your experience without establishment or sensationalism. Dr. Jameson's account became one of the prime examples in the Census of Hallucinations, which was published in 1894, of what the SPR terms a crisis apparition. A vision of a person appearing to someone close to them at that exact moment of their death. The SPR documented hundreds of similar cases over the years. Lord Charlesborough Broughton, travelling to Scandinavia, he saw his cousin GF appear in his train compartment dressed formally, leaning back as if struggling to breathe. Later on, he learned that his cousin had died at that exact moment. A woman in London woke to see her brother standing at the foot of her bed in his military uniform looking sad. The next morning she received a telegram that he had been killed in action, at the same time that she had saw him. A sailor's mother saw her son walk through her parlour, dripping wet, reaching out to her. 3 days later, the ship arrived in port. Her son had been washed overboard at that exact time that she saw his apparition. These weren't random hallucinations. They happened at moments of death. They appeared to people with strong emotional bonds, and they carried a quality of urgency, as if the dying person was making one final attempt to communicate. But why? Well, some researchers point to the stone tape theory. The idea that intense emotions can imprint themselves on the environment, creating echoes that replay under certain conditions. Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII, provides a famous example of this. Arrested at Hampton Court Palace in 1541, she broke free from her guards and ran screaming down what's now called the Haunted Gallery, begging Henry to spare her life. For centuries, visitors have reported seeing a spectral figure running down that gallery in anguish, hearing ghostly screams, feeling inexplicable cold spots. But Catherine's ghost seems unaware of witnesses. She just runs, screams, and then disappears, replaying her final desperate moments over and over for eternity. A recording, a psychic imprint on these very stones. The stone tape theory works for residual hauntings like Catherine's, but it doesn't explain crisis apparitions like Dr. Jameson's. Mrs. G didn't appear in her own home, where she died. She appeared in Dr. Jameson's bedroom, a place that she had never been. And she appeared at that exact moment of her death, not replaying some traumatic past event. This wasn't residual energy. This was something targeted, intentional, personal. A final goodbye from someone who, in their last moments, thought of the doctor who had tried to help her. Dr. Jameson's experience changed him. "It is not a story I tell lightly," he said to a colleague. "It was not a dream nor a trick of the eye. I know fine what I saw, and it has just changed the way I view the world now." His wife, though supportive, was relieved when public discussion of the event eventually faded. "It was an unsettling time," she admitted to a friend. "I think we were both eager to return back to normalcy." But can you ever really return back to normalcy after something like that? After seeing proof, undeniable personal proof, that death isn't necessarily an ending, that the bonds we form from others might be strong enough to transcend the final threshold. The house at 35 Rutland Street no longer stands as it once did. Edinburgh has moved on, as cities do. The building has been absorbed into the ever-changing fabric of what's called New Town, but the story remains. Documented, investigated, and published by the Society for Psychical Research as one of the clearest examples of a crisis apparition ever recorded. Dr. W. A. Jameson was a rational man, a physician, a scientist, not someone prone to flights of fancy or supernatural beliefs. And on Christmas Eve morning, back in 1887 at exactly 7:30 a.m, his dying patient appeared at the foot of his bed simply to say goodbye. The Victorians understood something that we've actually forgotten. Christmas isn't just about joy and celebration, it's also about remembrance. About acknowledging those who are no longer at our tables. About the fragility of life and the bonds that hold us together, even beyond death. Ghost stories at Christmas weren't morbid entertainment, they were a way to honour those connections. To remember that love doesn't end when the heart stops beating. Dr. Jameson's experience reminds us that even in the face of the unknown, human compassion transcends everything. Mrs. G, in her final moments, thought not of herself but of the doctor who had cared for her, and somehow, through means we still don't understand, she reached across the boundary between life and death just to let him know. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, this message remains the same. The people we care about leave marks on us, impressions that will never fade when they're gone, and sometimes, just sometimes, those impressions become visible. Even on a snowy Christmas Eve morning on a quiet street in Edinburgh's West End at 7:30 a.m. The ghost of Johnny One Arm. Not every ghost is tied to a building. Some haunt specific closes in Edinburgh, specific rooms, specific stones. But others, well, others are condemned to wander, to shuffle through the darkness on broken legs, dragging themselves through the wynds and the closes with unfinished business burning in whatever left their soul. This is the story of Johnny One Arm, and if you hear footsteps behind you on an Edinburgh street late at night, footsteps with an odd, shuffling, uneven rhythm, you might want to walk a little faster. 1689, the Court of Session. John Chiesley stands before the court, hands gripping the wooden rails so hard his knuckles have gone white. The judge, Sir George Lockhart, Lord President of the Court of Session, has just delivered his ruling. Child maintenance, a substantial sum, more than John can ever afford, more than he thinks is fair, and certainly more than he's willing to pay. "This is an outrage," John's voice echoes through the courtroom. "You'll regret this, Lockhart, mark my words. You'll regret this." Sir George doesn't even look up from his papers. He's heard all this before. Angry husbands, bitter debtors, desperate criminals. Threats are part of the job when you're one of the most powerful judges in Scotland. The guards escort John Chiesley from the courtroom, still shouting, still making threats. Sir George Lockhart forgets about him within the hour. That's his first mistake. It's a cold spring evening in Edinburgh. The service at St Giles Kirk has just ended and the congregation spills out onto the Royal Mile. Sir George Lockhart emerges with the crowd, pulling his cloak tighter against the wind. He's tired. It's been a long week of cases, petitions, arguments. All he wants is to get home, have supper and sit by the fire. He starts walking down the high street towards his house on Old Bank Close. And that's when he feels it. Not anything that he can see, not anything that he can hear over the evening bustle of the city. It's just a feeling, the sensation of eyes on the back of his neck. The primitive awareness that something, someone, is behind him. Sir George glances over his shoulder nervously. Nah, nothing. Just people going about their business. Merchants closing their shops, couples walking arm in arm. He keeps on walking, but the feeling doesn't go away. If anything, it intensifies. So he picks up the pace. The streets are narrower now as he turns into the close leading to his home. The tall tenement buildings block out what little daylight remains. Shadows pull in doorways and those footsteps behind him. Are they getting closer? Sir George can see his door now. It's just 50 yards. 40. 30. He's almost running now. 20 yards. He reaches his front door, fumbling in his pocket for his keys, fingers clumsy with sudden, inexplicable panic. Lockhart. The voice comes from behind him, a single word, spoken with such cold deliberation that Sir George's blood freezes in his veins. He turns. John Chiesley stands 6 feet away, grinning, and in his hand, levelled directly at St George's chest, is a pistol. "I told you," John says softly, "that you would regret it." For murdering the Lord President of the Court of Session, one of the most powerful men in Scotland, John Chiesley's punishment was designed to be memorable. First, they broke both of his legs. Both of them. Shattered the bones with iron rods while he was strapped to a wooden frame in the grass market. Then, as the crowd watched on, they took the arm that had fired the pistol, his right arm, and hacked it off at the shoulder. The executioner needed 3 blows to do this. Finally, with blood pouring out from his wounds, they hanged him. But they didn't take the body down. For 3 days, John Chiesley's corpse swung from the gibbet. For 3 days, John Chiesley's corpse swung from the gibbet at the grass market as a warning to anyone who might consider murdering a judge. His broken legs dangled uselessly. The stump where his right arm had been drew flies. On the 4th day, the guards came to cut him down for burial, but the body was gone. Not cut down, gone. The rope was still tied in its noose, swaying in the wind, but John Chiesley had vanished. It was a few weeks later. A woman leaving the White Horse Inn on the Royal Mile swore that she saw a figure in the shadows, a man with only one arm, grinning at her from the darkness of a close. When she screamed, he simply melted back into the shadows. More spooky sightings like this followed and were reported throughout the city, always at night, always in the narrow dark closes. A one-armed man with a shuffling broken gait. Sometimes he just watched, sometimes he followed. Sometimes he reached out with his remaining hand as if to grab. People started calling him Johnny One Arm, and for nearly 300 years the sightings continued. The shuffling footsteps in the dark, the one-armed shadow lurking in closes, that feeling of being followed, of something wrong just dragging itself through Edinburgh's ancient streets. 1965, Dalry. During renovations in the Dalry area of Edinburgh, miles from where John Chiesley was executed, workers broke through an old stone wall and found a skeleton. It was buried, roughly without ceremony, in what appeared to be an old hidden cellar. The skeleton had only one arm. The right arm was completely missing, severed at the shoulder. The legs showed signs of having been violently shattered. And around the neck bone, green with age and crusted with rust, hung an antique pistol on a leather cord. The authorities knew immediately what they had found. This was John Chiesley, Johnny One Arm himself. Someone, perhaps maybe sympathisers, perhaps grave robbers, or perhaps something else, had stolen his body from the grass market and then hidden it there miles away. The skeleton was given a proper Christian burial. Last rites were said, the earth was blessed. And just like that, any sightings of Johnny One Arm suddenly stopped. The shuffling footsteps disappeared from Edinburgh streets. The one-armed shadow was seen no more. After 276 years of wandering, John Chiesley was finally at rest. Well, almost. Here's the thing that keeps me awake sometimes. The arm. His right arm. You know, the one that fired the pistol. The one they hacked off and presumably burned or buried separately. Well, it was never found with the skeleton. So it's still out there. Somewhere. A withered, severed arm with a murder still clinging to its bones. An arm that pulled the trigger. An arm that was cut from its body and condemned separately, as if it alone carried the guilt. I mean, the body might be at rest, but the arm, well, the arm is still missing. So if you're walking through Edinburgh late at night and you hear those shuffling footsteps behind you, if you feel something watching you from the darkness of a close, if something tugs at your ankle from the shadows, well, maybe it's not Johnny One Arm anymore. Maybe it's just simply his arm, still dragging itself through the cobbles of Edinburgh, still looking for the rest of its body, still hungry for revenge. Five towers crown Fyvie Castle in Aberdeenshire. Each represents family who owned its fortress over the centuries. But there's something wrong with Fyvie, something that's been wrong for over 500 years. Since the late 1400s, not a single firstborn son has inherited this castle, not one. They've died in wars, from sudden illness, in bizarre accidents. The castle passes to second sons, to daughters, or to distant cousins, anyone except the natural heir. And it all started with a single insult, an insult to the most dangerous man in Scotland. So it's sometime in the late 15th century, 1470s, maybe 1480s, the exact year is lost, but what happened that day echoes still. Thomas the Rhymer stands at the boundary of Fyvie Castle. Rain is beginning to fall. 7 years. 7 years and a day he's been waiting for the Laird of Fyvie to receive him as a guest. 7 years since he sent word that he was coming, since he was promised hospitality. 7 years of broken promises. Thomas isn't just any traveller. They call him True Thomas, the Rhymer, the Prophet. Some say he spent 7 years in fairyland with the Queen of the Fairies herself, and when he returned, he could no longer tell a lie. Every word from his mouth comes true, whether it's a blessing or whether it's a curse. And he's been kept waiting. As Thomas approaches the great doors of Fyvie Castle, the wind picks up, the sky darkens, too fast, unnaturally fast. A freak storm erupts from nowhere, and just as Thomas reaches the entrance, a massive gust of wind slams the door shut right in his face. The sound echoes across the courtyard, final, dismissive. Thomas stands there in the pelting rain, staring at those closed doors. His cloak is soaked through, water runs down his face, and something inside him, something ancient and terrible, finally breaks. He raises his hand and speaks. His voice carries despite the howling wind, and every word lands like a hammer blow. Until 3 stones, stolen from the boundary markers of this land, are found and reunited within these walls, no firstborn son shall ever inherit Fyvie Castle. The wind gently dies, the rain stops. Thomas the Rhymer turns and walks away. Behind those doors, someone laughs. It's just an old man, raving probably. Just words. But Thomas the Rhymer has never been wrong. Generation after generation, the pattern repeats. The firstborn son of the family that held Fyvie back in the 1500s, well, he was killed in battle. The heir in the 1600s died of fever at age of 19. What about the 1700s? Well, that young man was thrown from his horse, his neck broken instantly. One family sells Fyvie to another, desperate to escape whatever darkness clings to the stones. The new family laughs at superstition, and then their firstborn son dies. The castle passes to brothers, to daughters who marry and change the family name, to distant cousins who never expected to inherit anything, but never, not once, not ever, to a firstborn son. Now, let's fast forward to sometime in the 19th century. Workers are digging on the grounds, repairing foundations, when a spade strikes something hard and solid. They brush away the dirt and find it. It's a stone, roughly carved, but ancient. One of the 3 stolen boundary markers. One of the 3 from Thomas's curse. There's debate about what to do with it. Some people want to bury it again, pretend that they just never found it. Others insist it should be brought inside, displayed. After all, the curse says 3 stones must be reunited. 1 is a start, isn't it? The stone is brought into the castle. They place it in a simple wooden bowl. Dry wood. They keep it in a dry room away from any source of moisture. But the stone begins to weep. Water beads on its surface constantly. It drips into the bowl. The bowl is bone dry. The room is bone dry. There's no logical source of moisture, but the stone weeps day after day, year after year, and it never stops. Staff at the castle whisper that the stone is crying. It's crying because it's all alone, crying because the curse still remains unbroken. The early 2000s. A museum curator is preparing an exhibition. The weeping stone is going to be one of those centerpieces. This mysterious artifact, this piece of living folklore. He's a practical man, the curator. Doesn't believe in curses. It's just a porous stone with some quirk of condensation, surely. He handles the stone carefully, cataloguing it, preparing the display case. And then things start going wrong. First, he twists his ankle. Painful, but not unusual. I mean, that could happen to anyone. A few days later, he sprains his knee. Whew, that is strange, but still just a coincidence. Then, in the middle of the night, he wakes up in pure agony. The pain is excruciating, radiating from his lower back. His wife rushes him to hospital and the doctors run some tests. Well, it's kidney stones. The curator stares at the diagnosis. Kidney stones. He thinks about the weeping stone sitting in his office. The stone that's part of a 500-year-old curse. The stone that's been weeping for over a century. And he never touches it again. The exhibition goes ahead, but someone else handles the installation. And the curator, well, he won't go near that stone. He won't even enter the room where it's being displayed. Because now he knows it's not a legend and it's not folklore. The curse is real. But there's another ghost at Fyvie, and her story might be even sadder than Thomas the Rhymer's curse. So it's 1601. Dame Lilias Drummond lies in her bed at Fyvie Castle, dying. Not from illness, but from heartbreak. See, her husband, Alexander Seton, has been carrying on a passionate public affair with her own young cousin, Griselle Leslie. Everyone knows. Everyone pities Lilias. But pity does not mend a broken heart. Lilias closes her eyes for the last time, and her last thought is this. She's won. Griselle has won. Lilias is barely cold in the ground when Alexander marries Griselle. Barely a month passes, the wedding is lavish, the celebration goes late into the night, and finally the newlyweds retire to the bridal chamber, the same room where Lilias died. Alexander and Griselle climb into bed, the candles are blown out, and the castle settles into silence. And then they hear it. Moaning. Low, mournful moaning, echoing through the walls. Heavy sighs, like someone is in deep grief. The sounds seem to come from everywhere, but then also nowhere. Almost from the stones themselves. Griselle clutches Alexander's arm. What is that? He simply doesn't answer. He doesn't know. Deep down though, he does know. The sounds continue throughout the night, and neither of them sleeps a wink. At dawn, Alexander gets out of bed and goes to the window for some air. He needs to clear his head, needs to shake off the oppressive feeling that's settled over the room. He opens the window and looks out at the castle wall. And then his blood runs cold. There, carved into the solid stone directly outside of their window, carved backwards as if someone had etched it from the outside looking in, are the words, D. Lilias Drummond. The stone is on the second floor. There's no ladder marks, there's no scaffolding, there's no way anyone could have reached that height. The letters are deep. This would have taken hours of work, would have made tremendous noise, and they would have heard this. But there's nothing, just those letters, just her name, carved backwards, as if she'd pressed her hands against the outside of the stone and pushed her name through from the other side. The inscription is still there, 500 years later. You can walk up to Fyvie Castle right now and see Lilias Drummond's name etched in that stone. No one's ever been able to explain this. Dame Lilias has never left Fyvie. Staff call her the Green Lady because she appears in flowing green robes, walking the corridors that she once called home. Sometimes you smell her before you see her, the sudden unmistakable scent of roses in the dead of winter, in rooms where no flowers grow. The temperature drops, your breath mists in front of you, and rose petals seem to hang in the air. She's not angry, she's not even vengeful, she's just there. Walking her home, climbing the stairs that she climbed in life, standing in doorways, looking out at the lands that should have been hers forever. Modern staff these days know the signs. When a room suddenly goes ice cold and fills with the scent of roses, they glance at each other and nod. The Green Lady is here. And they leave her to her wandering, because what else can they do? This was her home. This is her home. Death did not change that. Just like Thomas's curse didn't end when he died, just like the stone keeps on weeping year after year. Fyvie Castle stands in Aberdeenshire, crowned with its 5 towers, beautiful in the Scottish sunlight. But 2 things remain true. That stone still weeps, and no firstborn son will ever inherit the castle. So that's 5A Castle. 500 years of a curse that's never even broken. And somewhere out there 2 more stones still remain hidden. If they're ever found, maybe Thomas the Rhymer will finally rest. But until then, the weeping stone cries on, and Lilias Drummond will walk her halls. Welcome to Scotland, where the stones remember everything. In 1589, King James VI of Scotland sailed to Denmark to collect his bride, Princess Anne. It should have been a simple voyage, a few days at sea, a royal wedding, a triumphant return. Instead, his fleet was battered by the worst storms anyone could remember. Ships were thrown off course, waves the size of houses crashed over the decks. One ship sank entirely, taking everyone aboard down into the Black North Sea. When James finally limped into port in Norway, forced to take shelter, the Danish authorities had one explanation: witchcraft. 6 Danish women had already been arrested, tortured and executed for raising these storms. They'd confessed to meeting the devil himself, to sailing in magical sieves, to cursing the royal wedding voyage. James didn't believe this. Well, not at first. He was an educated man, a scholar. Superstition was for the ignorant masses, not for kings. But then he returned to Scotland, and he discovered that the conspiracy was bigger than anyone ever imagined. The witches weren't in Denmark, they were in Scotland, in his kingdom, and they had been plotting to murder him. Tranent, Scotland, late 1590. Gillis Duncan is a young servant girl working in the household of David Seaton, a deputy bailiff. She's maybe 16, 17 years old at the time, and she has a gift. People come to her when they are sick, when their children have fever. When nothing else works, Gillis lays her hands on them, whispers prayers, and sometimes, often, they get better. It's a blessing, surely a talent for hearing. But David Seaton doesn't see it that way. He watches Gillis slip out at night, watches her come back at dawn, exhausted. Where does she go? What does she do out there in the darkness? And those healings, well, they work a bit too well, too consistently. That's not natural. That's not godly. That is the devil's work. So one night, Seaton confronts her. Where do you go at night? Nowhere, sir. Just out for walks. Liar! He grabs her arm. You've been meeting someone, haven't you? No, sir, Who? Gillies tries to pull away, but Seaton's grip tightens. He calls for help. Other men arrive. They take Gillis to a back room and lock the door. What happens next is documented, recorded, legal. They strip her naked, searching for the devil's mark. Some sort of blemish or mole maybe, where Satan supposedly suckled her blood. They find one on her neck, a small mark, probably a birthmark, but that's enough. They torture her, sleep deprivation at first, keeping her awake for days until she's hallucinating. Then come the thumbscrews. Then pillywinks. So these are iron vices that crush your fingers, breaking them bone by bone. Gillies holds out for days, but exhaustion and agony breaks everyone eventually. So she confesses. Yes, she did meet the devil. Yes, she learned healing from him. Yes, she attended midnight meetings with other witches. Who else? Seaton demands. Give me names. Terrified and broken, Gillies does just that. She names dozens. Servants, merchants, respected citizens. And one name in particular catches everyone's attention. Agnes Sampson. See, Agnes Sampson is in her 60s. She's lived in Keith, a small town near Edinburgh, her entire life. Everyone knows her. Everyone respects her. She's a midwife, one of the best actually. She's delivered hundreds of babies. She knows every herb, every remedy, knows how to ease pain, stop bleeding, bring down a fever. People call her the wise wife of Keith. She's never harmed anyone, never done anything but help. But Gillies Duncan, well, she uttered her name, and that's all it takes. November of 1590. They come for Agnes at dawn. They drag her from her home. She's confused, frightened. What has she done? What do they want? You have been accused of witchcraft, they tell her. That's madness. I'm a healer. I'm a Christian woman. Yeah, we'll see. They take her to Edinburgh Castle, down into the dungeons, into a cell with no windows, no light, just cold stone and darkness. And then they begin. First they shave her, every hair on her body, head, eyebrows, everywhere. They're looking for the devil's mark, some hidden spot where she's nursed demons. And they find one. A small mark on her genitals. She protests, it's just age, it's just a blemish, everyone has these marks. But they've found it, and that is solid proof. Next comes the scold's bridle. An iron cage that fits over the head. 4 sharp prongs are positioned inside. 2 that press against the tongue, 2 against the inside of the cheeks. If she tries to speak, the prongs will pierce deeper. If she screams, they will tear her mouth apart. They fasten it on her head and lock her to a cell wall. Days pass, maybe even a week. She's not allowed to sleep. Guards shake her awake every single time she starts to drift. Sleep deprivation is one of the most effective tortures. Within days, the mind breaks down, hallucinations will start, and reality becomes fluid. Then comes the rope. They wrap it around her head and twist. A form of garroting. The pressure builds until she feels her skull will crack open. The pain is indescribable. But Agnes is strong. She's stubborn. She's innocent, and she will not confess to lies. I have done nothing wrong, she whispers through her torn mouth. Nothing. They increase the pressure. And finally, after days, maybe weeks, of torture, Agnes finally breaks. Yes, she whispers. Yes, I confess. Confess to what? And Agnes tells them a story. Maybe she believes it by now. Maybe she thinks it's true. Sleep deprivation and pain can make the mind believe anything. Maybe she's just telling them what they want to hear. Anything, just to make it all stop. She confesses to attending a witches' sabbat, a midnight meeting in the village of North Berwick. 200 witches, she says. They met in the old church, and the devil himself was there. And what did you do? They demand. Well, we sailed, Agnes whispers, in sieves across the Firth of Forth. We danced, we kissed the devil's buttocks, and we plotted. Plotted what? To kill the king. When that confession reaches King James, everything changes. This isn't just witchcraft anymore. This is treason, a conspiracy to murder the monarch. The storms that nearly killed him weren't natural. They were attacks. James comes to Edinburgh Castle personally. He wants to hear this for himself. They bring Agnes before him in chains. She's barely recognisable, emaciated, broken, her mouth torn and bleeding from the bridle. James looks at her sceptically. This, old woman? This is the dangerous witch? Tell me, he says coldly, how did you attempt to kill me? Agnes recites her confession. The Sabbath at North Berwick, the devil appearing as a man in black, the witches sailing in sieves out to the king's ship. They threw a christened cat tied to body parts into the sea to raise these storms. James listens. He just doesn't believe a word. This is nonsense, he says. Raving ramblings of a tortured old woman. Agnes looks up at him. Her eyes are hollow but clear. Come closer, your majesty, she whispers. James hesitates at first, then he steps forward. Agnes beckons him even closer, until his ear is near her mouth, and she whispers something private, something intimate. Details about his wedding night with Anne, things that happened in their bedchamber, things that only James and Anne would ever know. James jerks back quickly, his face is pale. How? How could she possibly know that? Unless she really did have supernatural powers, unless the devil really did give her knowledge that she shouldn't have. From that moment, King James VI became a true believer. Witchcraft is absolutely real. Demons are real, and Satan walks among us. And he will personally ensure every witch in Scotland burns. Agnes wasn't the only one arrested. Dozens were taken, tortured, forced to confess. One of the most prominent was Dr. John Fian, schoolmaster at Salt Pans. He was young, educated, well respected. He taught children, led prayers, lived a respectable life. Gillis Duncan named him as the coven's leader, the one who communicated directly with Satan. They arrest Fian and take him into the dungeons. His torture is particularly brutal, documented in detail, recorded by witnesses. First, the boots. An iron device that fits around the lower leg. Wedges are hammered between the boot and the leg, crushing bones. They break his legs slowly, methodically. The sound of splintering bone echoes throughout the dungeon. Then his fingernails. One by one, they are ripped out with pincers. When the nails are gone, they insert iron pins into the raw, bleeding nail beds, slowly pushing them deep into his flesh. He screams, he begs, but he will not confess. So they increase the torture. They hang him by his thumbs with weights attached to his feet. They keep him awake for days, and they apply red-hot irons to his skin. Finally, eventually, he breaks. Yes, he's a witch. Yes, he attended the Sabbath. Yes, he raised these storms. Yes, he tried to kill the king. He signs a confession with his mangled hands. But then, something extraordinary happens. Somehow, overnight, he escapes. No one knows how. The cell was locked. Guards were posted outside. But in the morning, he is gone. They find him 2 days later hiding in the countryside, and when they drag him back, he recants everything. I confessed under torture, he says. None of it is true. I'm innocent. King James himself interrogates him and tries to persuade him. But Fian refuses to reconfess. Well, then you know what? You will burn anyway, James says coldly. So on January 27th of 1591, Dr. John Fian is taken to Castle Hill in Edinburgh. He can barely walk by this time. His legs are shattered, his feet are crushed, and they have to carry him up to the stake. He's strangled at first, the customary mercy, then his body is burned. But witnesses say something odd happened. Even while being strangled, Fian's lips moved. He was saying something. Was it a prayer? Was it a curse? No one could hear. Agnes Simpson is brought to trial on January 1591, and she's charged with 53 separate indictments, including attending the North Berwick Sabbath with 200 other witches, meeting the devil and kissing his buttocks, sailing in a sieve up the Firth of Forth, tying human body parts to dead cats and throwing them in the sea to raise these storms, attempting to poison King James with toad venom, performing healing through demonic powers. The verdict, well, it's inevitable, isn't it? Guilty on all counts. On January 16th, 1591, they take Agnes to Castle Hill. A huge crowd gathers, thousands of people. This is the witch who tried to kill their king, the devil's handmaiden. Agnes is tied to the stake. She's so weak from torture and imprisonment that she can barely stand. The executioner garrots her. The iron collar tightens around her throat until her neck breaks. It's a mercy, that. At least she's dead before the flames can touch her. Her body burns for hours until there's nothing left but ash, and then the crowd cheers. The North Berwick witch trials don't end with Agnes and Fian. Over the next year, more than 70 people are arrested and interrogated, then tortured. Most of them confess, but most of them burn. King James becomes obsessed. He writes a book called Demonology, laying out the reality of witchcraft, demons and Satan's influence on this world. It becomes hugely influential, required reading for scholars. When he becomes King James I of England in 1603, he brings his witch-hunting obsession south, and the paranoia spreads. In 1611, he commissions a new translation of the Bible, the King James Version. Scholars believe his experience with the North Berwick trials influenced certain passages, particularly those dealing with witchcraft. In 1606, William Shakespeare writes Macbeth, specifically for King James. The three witches in the play, the prophecies, the manipulation of events through supernatural means, direct references to North Berwick, to Agnes Simpson, to the king's experience with these real witches. The North Berwick witch trials change Britain forever. They launch a century of witch hunts, result in thousands of deaths, all because of a storm at sea and a young servant girl who confessed under torture. 2014, Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh. A maintenance worker is doing his evening rounds. The palace is closed off to tourists. It's just him and the security guards. He's walking down a corridor when he sees someone ahead. A woman, dressed quite oddly, old-fashioned clothes like period costume. Maybe it's a tour guide who stayed late. "Excuse me," he calls out, "the palace is closed." The woman simply doesn't respond. She's walking really slowly. She's limping. Each step looks really painful, agonised. The worker gets closer. "Miss, you need to..." She turns. Her face is gaunt, skeletal. Her mouth is torn, it's bloodied. She has no hair. She's completely bald. And her eyes, Well, her eyes are hollow. The worker freezes. This isn't a person. This is... The woman takes a step towards him. Her mouth opens wide, but no sound comes out. Just blood. Fresh blood. Running right down her chin. The worker runs. He doesn't even look back. Doesn't stop until he's out of the building. Security goes up to check the corridor. Nothing. There's no woman. There's no blood. Nothing. But they know who he saw. The staff have seen her several times before. Bald Agnes. Agnes Sampson. Still walking the place where she was tortured. Still bearing the marks of what they did to her. She appears every few years. Always limping. Always silent except for the blood. Let's go back now to the 1990s. Same place. Holyrood Palace. A German diplomat is staying at the palace for an official visit. Middle of the night he wakes up suddenly and he's unsure why. His room is suddenly freezing. His breath mists in front of him. And at the foot of his bed, floating in mid-air, is a naked woman. Transparent, her arms are outstretched as if nailed to an invisible cross, her mouth wide open in a silent scream. No hair, emaciated, covered in marks, burns, cuts and bruises. The diplomat can't move, he can't breathe. He just watches as this apparition hovers there, screaming silently for what feels like hours, but it's probably just seconds. Then she fades. He checks out the next morning, refuses to explain why. The palace staff know fine well. They've heard this story before. Agnes Sampson died in 1591, but she's not resting. She's still there, still suffering, still trying to tell someone, anyone, that she was innocent. The North Berwick witch trials, Scotland's first major witch hunt, personally overseen by a king who became obsessed with the devil. 70 people were arrested, dozens tortured, more burned at the stake. And it all started with just a storm and a lie extracted through agony. Agnes Sampson confessed to flying on sieves, meeting the devil, raising storms to kill a king. None of it was true, but she burned anyway. And on cold nights at Holyrood Palace, she still walks, limping, bleeding, silent. Bald Agnes, the wise wife of Keith, the woman who whispered secrets to a king and paid for it with her life. Remember her name, because Scotland never will. Glamis Castle has been the ancestral seat to the Earls of Strathmore and Kinghorn since King Robert II granted the thainage of Glamis to Sir John Lyon in 1372. Once host to Mary Queen of Scots, Glamis is said to have inspired one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, Macbeth. Glamis also has a deep connection to today's royal family, as it was the childhood home of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and the birthplace of Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. But there's a room in Glamis Castle that doesn't exist. Oh, it's there. It takes up some space, but if you walk the corridors, you won't find a door. If you count the windows from the outside and then count the rooms on the inside, the numbers just don't match. There are windows with no rooms behind them, rooms with no way in. And if you put your ear against certain walls late at night, you might hear something that's been going on for over 500 years. Shouting, cursing, the sound of dice rattling across a table. It's a Saturday night in the 1480s, close to midnight. Alexander Lindsay, the 4th Earl of Crawford, is drunk, spectacularly drunk. They call him Earl Beardy because of his wild, unkempt beard and even wilder temperament. He's violent when he drinks, cruel even, the kind of man you avoid when you hear his voice rising. Tonight, he's visiting Glamis Castle, and he wants to play some cards. "Someone play with me," he roars, slamming his fist on the table. His companions shift uncomfortably. They glance at the windows, at the darkness outside. "My lord," one of them ventures carefully. "It's nearly midnight. The Sabbath begins." "I don't care about the bloody Sabbath." Earl Beardy lurches to his feet. "I want to play cards. Someone. Anyone." "We cannot, my lord. Not on the Sabbath. It would be..." "I'll play cards with anyone." Beardy's voice echoes through the stone halls. "I'll play until doomsday. I'll play with the devil himself if I have to." His companions freeze. You just don't say things like that, not even in jest. especially not at midnight, not when the Sabbath is about to begin. The room goes very quiet, and then 3 sharp raps on the chamber door. Every man in the room runs towards the sound. It's midnight. The castle is locked down for the night. No one should be knocking. Errol Beardy grins. He's far too drunk to even be afraid. Enter. The door swings open. A tall gentleman stands in the doorway, dressed in a long dark coat. Hat pulled low, his face is shadowed, but his voice is smooth, cultured, and almost amused. I understand you're in need of a card partner. Errol Beardy's grin widens. I am indeed, sir. Come in, come in. The stranger steps into the room. He moves wrong. Too smooth, too fluid, almost like he's gliding rather than walking. The temperature drops and the candles flicker. Shall we play in private? The stranger asks. Aye, we shall. Beardy grabs a bottle and a fresh deck of cards. He leads the stranger into an adjacent chamber, a small room off the main hall, and the door closes behind them. The lock turns from the inside. Errol Beardy's companions sit in the main hall staring at the closed door. They really should leave. They should go to bed, but something keeps them rooted to their seats. From behind that door they hear voices, the shuffling of cards, the click of coins. And then the shouting starts. Damn you! You cheating! More card shuffling, dice rattling, but the dice, they sound wrong. Too loud, too many of them, like dozens of dice all rolling at once. The shouting gets worse. Errol Beardy's voice rises to a roar, cursing, blaspheming, the foulest language imaginable, and underneath it all, woven through it, that other voice, smooth, amused, laughing. One of the servants can't take it anymore. He creeps up to the door and bends down, pressing his eye up to the keyhole. For a brief moment, he sees movement, cards flying through the air, a glimpse of Errol Beardy's face, twisted in rage and something else. Fear? And the stranger sitting across from him, still in shadow, except, well, a flash of light explodes from the keyhole. The servant screams and falls backwards, clutching his face. Blood pours between his fingers. When they pull his hands away, his eye is completely gone. Not injured, gone. Burned right out of his skull by whatever he saw through that keyhole. And then the door slams open. Errol Beardy stands there swaying, his face pale, his eyes are wild, darting like a concerned animal. Behind him the room is empty. The stranger's gone. But there's no other door, there's not even a window. But the stranger has vanished. Get out, Beardy whispers. All of you. Get out! They flee. Behind them they hear Errol Beardy laughing. Or is it laughing? It might be sobbing. And beneath that, echoing up from somewhere deep in the stones, that smooth, amused voice, still laughing. The chamber was bricked up the next day, sealed completely. No door, no window, no way in, no way out. It didn't help. The sounds continued. Staff heard them. Guests heard them. Voices arguing, cards shuffling, dice rolling, cursing that would make a sailor blush, and always, always that terrible haunting laughter. In the 1800s, a group of guests decided to solve this mystery once and for all. They went through the castle with white bed sheets hanging them from every accessible window, marking each room from the outside. When they finished and they stood back to look, their blood ran cold. 4 windows had no sheets. 4 windows, high up in the towers. But when they went back inside and searched every corridor, every room, every closet, there was no way to access those windows. No rooms behind them, no stairs leading up, nothing, just solid stone wall. Except there had to be rooms there, there had to be space, the windows proved it. One guest, a Lord Strathmore who later inherited Glamis, allegedly found the secret room during renovations. He spent less than 15 minutes inside. When he emerged, his face was grey, and he never spoke of what he'd seen. For the rest of his life, he simply refused to discuss it. Children still report waking in the night at Glamis. They tell their parents about the dark figure standing at the foot of their bed. A tall man, they say, with a beard. He just stands there, staring at them with eyes full of malice. He wanted me to play a game, one child said, but I didn't like his game. It felt bad. Staff find playing cards scattered in rooms that were locked, dice on windowsills where no one has been, the smell of whiskey and smoke in chambers that haven't been used in years. And late at night, usually close to midnight, usually on a Saturday, if you press your ear against certain walls in certain towers, you'll hear it. Again. The game never ended, you see. Errol Beardy said he'd played until doomsday, and the devil took him at his word. But there's another secret at Glams, one that might be even darker than Errol Beardy's eternal card game. So it's October 21st of 1821. The wife of the 11th Earl of Glams goes into labour. It's her first child, the heir. Everyone in the castle is so excited, a new generation, a new beginning. The midwife emerges from the birthing chamber, her face is ashen. "Fetch the Earl," she whispers, "fetch him now." The Earl rushes in, the door closes, and from inside there's a terrible heavy silence. Hours pass. Finally, the Earl emerges. His face is blank, carefully controlled. The child was stillborn, he announces. A boy? He didn't survive. The family records confirm it. Thomas Bowes Lyon, born October 21st, 1821, died the same day. But servants began to whisper. No one saw a body. There was no funeral, there was no grave, there was no mourning period. The Countess recovered and had more children, healthy children, normal children, and life went on. But sometimes late at night, staff can hear crying from parts of the castle that should be empty, heavy footsteps in sealed corridors. On very rare occasions, servants swore that they saw a figure on the roof at dawn, a hunched, misshapen thing lurking near the battlements before disappearing. The whispers grew. The firstborn son hadn't died. He'd been hidden, born so severely deformed that the family couldn't bear to present him, couldn't let the world see. So they kept him, locked away in those secret rooms, fed, tended, but kept alive, but never acknowledged. And they say that when each Earl of Glams turns 21, his father would take him aside. They would walk to a hidden door and the father would unlock it. They would go inside and the son would learn the family's darkest secret. When they emerge, the son would never be the same. In 1793, the famous writer Sir Walter Scott visited Glams Castle. He was young then, full of romantic notions about Scottish history and Gothic atmosphere. He was given a room in one of the towers, a beautiful room, historic, the kind of place a writer dreams of sleeping. He lasted one night. Years later, he wrote about that visit. I began to consider myself as too far from the living and somewhat too near to the dead. He never elaborated on this, he never explained what he meant, but he never stayed at Glams Castle ever again. The tradition continued through generations. When each heir turned 21, he learned the secret, and each one was changed by it. In 1876, a guest at Glams asked the Earl about this legend, and the Earl's face darkened. "If you could only know the nature of the secret," he said quietly, "you would thank God that you did not. It is a secret that cannot be told. I am burdened with it. My son will be burdened with it, and his son after him." But what was this secret? The hidden heir? The room where the devil still plays? Or both? No one knows. The last Earl who would have been told that secret died in 1972. If the tradition continued, the current Earl does know, but he's never said a word. Queen Elizabeth II spent her childhood summers at Glams. Her mother, the Queen Mother, was born here. Did the young Princess Elizabeth and Margaret hear the sounds at night? Did they see the dark figure that children still report to this day? Did their mother know this secret? The royal family has never commented, but the Queen Mother, in her later years, would sometimes grow quiet when Glams was mentioned. Her eyes would take on a distant look, and she would change the subject, as if remembering something from those long childhood summers, something she'd been told never to speak of. Today, Glam's Castle is open to the public. You can tour the grounds, walk the corridors, see the beautiful rooms and historic artefacts. But certain areas remain off limits, certain doors stay locked, and if you ask the tour guides about that secret room, about Errol Beardy's chamber, about what happened to Thomas Bowes' lion, well, they'll just smile politely and say the family prefers not to discuss it. Late at night, after the tours end and the castle empties, staff lock up quickly. They don't linger, because sometimes as the sun sets and shadows lengthen across those ancient stones, you can still hear it. Again! Roll of the dice, crashes of fists on tables, and that laughter, that terrible eternal laughter. Errol Beardy made his bargain. He plays until doomsday. And somewhere in those sealed rooms, in the spaces that don't exist on any map, the game continues forever. Right, so this next story is actually a personal story of mine. I had posted it as one of my first videos on this channel. It remained on the channel for a short period of time before I took it down, for no other reason than I just figured that maybe it wasn't the time to share it. I feel that now is that time. If any of you listening now was watching back then, it might sound familiar. Here is my story. Most silent 999 calls are nothing. Kids playing with phones, pocket dials, elderly people who've pressed their emergency buttons by accident. When you're a police officer working the night shift, you attend dozens of these calls. You knock on doors and embarrassed parents apologise and you move on to the next job. But not all silent 999s are nothing. It's 4 AM on a Wednesday morning in central Scotland, those dead hours when even the drunks have staggered home and the world feels suspended between darkness and dawn. I'm in the police car with my colleague, and both of us are nursing a nice lukewarm coffee when the radio crackles to life.
Control to Foxtrot Delta.
I reach for the radio.
Go ahead.
Please proceed grade 2 to a silent 999. Over.
The address comes through. It's a local inn, one of those traditional Scottish pubs with letting room upstairs. Half a dozen guest rooms, a bar downstairs. It's been there for over a century. Off season now, so it should be fairly quiet. Well, it should be. We pull up outside 10 minutes later. The building sits in complete darkness, not a single light in any window. The street lamps cast long shadows across the car park, and there's that peculiar quality to the silence at 4 AM. It's not peaceful, it's just empty. My colleague and I exchange a quick glance. It's probably nothing, he says. Yeah, probably. We do a walk around first, standard procedure. Every window is dark, every door is locked. The place looks deserted. It feels deserted. I stick my thumb on my radio.
Foxtrot Delta 522 to control. Can you contact the keyholder, please? The building's secure, but we need access.
Roger that, 522, stand by.
30 seconds later.
Keyholder is next door, she's on her way.
And indeed, less than a minute passes before a light flicks on in the bungalow adjacent to the inn. A woman in her 50s appears, pulling a cardigan over her nightdress, keys jangling in her hand. Hiya, what's happened? Is everything alright? Aye, I'm sure everything's fine. We've just received a 999 call from this address. I explain it all to her. It's a silent 999, no one speaking on the line. She frowns, inserting the key into the front door. That's weird. There's no guests, it's off-season. This place has been completely empty and it has been for about 2 weeks. The locks click, the door swings inward, and we step into the darkness. The inn smells of old beer and furniture polish. Our torches cut through the blackness as we move through the ground floor. The bar area, the lounge, the kitchen, everything is neat, everything's locked up tight. The landlord flicks on the lights. Right, I think we should check upstairs, I tell the owner. She follows us up the stone winding staircase. Once we're in the upstairs hallway, the floorboards are creaking. 6 guest rooms in total, all empty, beds are all made, curtains are all drawn. The heating's off and there's that peculiar coldness to a building that's been unoccupied for a while. Not just temperature, something else. Maybe it's just the absence of human presence. But there's nothing. No one. My colleague and I check each room in turn. Yup, there's definitely no one in here. The landlord says, do you know what, it wouldn't matter anyway if there was, because there's no phones up here. There's no landlines at all. In fact, the only landline in the whole place is down behind the bar. So, back downstairs we go. I radio up to control again.
Foxtrot Delta 522 to AH. Building's clear. Can you give us more information on that 999 call?
There's a pause, then our controller's voice comes through, and something in her tone makes the hairs on my neck stand up.
Roger that, 522. Johnny. The caller didn't speak, but I could hear breathing. Definitely someone on the line. Not silence, not a dead connection. Breathing. The call was crackly, very crackly, like an old line. Lasted about 45 seconds, then they hung up. I couldn't determine if it was male or female.
Understood. Can you get me the originating number? Over.
The three of us stand in the darkened bar area, me, my colleague and the owner, just waiting. The silence feels different now, a bit heavier. The radio crackles again. A phone number. I write it down and read it back for confirmation, then I turn to the owner. Is this your number here? She's already moving towards the bar, gesturing to the phone mounted on the wall behind it, the only external line in the building. Well, that's the main line there, she says, lifting the receiver to check it. But no, that's not our number. Our number is... I read out the number from the control again, and then I watched the colour drain from her face. All of it. Like someone's just pulled a plug. Wait, say that again? She whispers. I repeat the number back to her slowly. She doesn't move for several seconds. She just stares at me. And in the beam of my torch, I can see her hands. They've started to tremble. I think you better follow me, she says. She leads us through the bar, past the pumps, to a door that I hadn't noticed when we first came in. A wooden, old, half hidden beside the stockroom. She opens it, and on the other side a stone step leads down into darkness. Cold air rises up to meet us, that particular damp coldness of underground spaces. Our torches find the light switch. A single bulb flickers to life. The cellar is exactly what you would expect. Beer kegs lined against one wall, crates of bottles, the metal cages they use for empty returns. Everything covered in a fine layer of dust, the smell of damp stone and stale beer. But the owner doesn't stop at the kegs. She walks us across the cellar to the far wall. That's when I see it. So it's an old oak bureau, and it sits against the stone, incongruous down there amongst all the beer storage. The wood is dark with age, the surface is thick with dust. She doesn't say anything, she just points to the bottom drawer. Have a look then. Open it. I slowly open the drawer, and inside is a single item. A phone. Not a modern telephone, but one of these old rotary dial phones, the kind I remember from my grandparents' house. The plastic has yellowed with age, the cord is still attached and coiled like a dead snake. I remove it completely and set it on top of the bureau. Dust motes dance in the torchlight. This phone, she says, and her voice is barely above a whisper, was connected down here in the late 80s. We used it for cellar stock orders. The line, well, she turns and points to the wall where an old phone line junction box is still mounted. The line was disconnected back in 1989. We moved everything upstairs. I step closer. The rotary dial has a clear plastic centre, and beneath it, handwritten on a faded piece of card, is a single phone number. I don't even need to check my notebook. It's the same number. The exact same number that the 999 came from at 4 AM in the morning. We stood in that cellar for what felt like a long time, but it was probably just only a minute. The three of us just staring at this dusty relic of a phone that hadn't been connected to anything for over 15 years. Has anyone been down here recently? My colleague asked. Well, no one. No one has a reason to come down here except me, the owner replies. And I haven't touched the phone in, well, years. We just left it in the drawer when we disconnected the line. I pick up the receiver anyway and hold it to my ear. Nothing, obviously. Not even a dial tone. It's just dead plastic and old wiring. Could someone have reconnected this? I ask. She shakes her head. The line's been decommissioned. It doesn't exist anymore. When we moved the main line upstairs in '89, as I said, they cut the connection at the exchange. I set the receiver down and then I take one look at my colleague. He's got the same expression I imagine is on my face, somewhere between confused and deeply uncomfortable. We filed a report, of course. We logged the call, logged the location, and logged the situation. Control confirmed the 999 call definitely came from that number. The phone company confirmed that that number was disconnected back in 1989, as the landlady had said, and had never been reactivated. To this day, no explanation was ever found. Here's what I know for certain. At 4 AM on an October morning in the early 2000s, a silent 999 call was made from a phone number that just simply didn't exist. A disconnected rotary phone in an old cellar made a call to emergency services, and someone or something was heard breathing on the other end of that line. The rest, the why and the how, well, that phone is probably still sitting in that drawer to this day. The owner wanted nothing to do with it after that night. Said she'd just leave it where it is, where it's been for decades. And somewhere in the archives of Police Scotland, there's an incident report with no explanation, just a silent 999, heavy breathing, and a phone that shouldn't have been able to make any sort of call. Every loch in Scotland has a warning. Every river, every ford, every pool where the water runs deep and dark. Don't touch the beautiful horse. No matter how gentle it seems, no matter how it kneels and beckons you, no matter how much you want to stroke its mane or climb onto its back, because once you touch it, you can never let go, and the kelpie is always hungry. In Scottish folklore, kelpies are water spirits, shapeshifters that usually appear as magnificent horses, black or grey, with coats that gleam like wet stone. They appear near lochs and rivers at dusk, in mist when the light is uncertain. They look tame, friendly. They kneel down as if inviting you to ride. Children especially are drawn to them. I mean, what child doesn't want to pet a beautiful horse? But kelpies aren't horses. They're predators. Their hide is magically adhesive. The moment your skin makes contact, you are stuck fast. You can't pull away, you can't let go, and then the kelpie rises and it runs. Not away from water, but towards it, straight into the dark depths. It drags you down into the dark cold water, and then it feeds. Days later, sometimes weeks, what's left of you washes up on the shore. Just pieces, entrails, organs. The kelpie eats everything else. But, do you know what? It's just legend, right? It's just a story to scare children, to keep them away from dangerous water. And that makes sense. Except Scotland is full of stories about children who didn't listen, about children who touched this beautiful horse. Sutherland is a village in the Highlands. It's a Sunday morning in summer, and it's probably the early 1700s. 8 children wake up early. They're supposed to go to church. Everyone goes to church on Sunday. Well, it's expected. Actually, it's required. But it's summer, and the sun is shining. The loch is sparkling, and church is so boring. "Let's go to the loch instead," one of them whispers. "We'll be in trouble," says another. "Only if we're caught." So, the 8 children slip away. 8 children, ranging in age from 6 years old to 12, running through the grass, laughing, free. They reach the loch's edge and splash in the shallows. The water is cold and clear. It's perfect. They're playing, splashing each other, when one of them hears something behind them. Soft footsteps on the grass. They all turn. A horse stands there, a magnificent stallion, grey coat gleaming in the morning sun, kind eyes, gentle demeanour. It's not saddled, there's no bridle, and there's no owner in sight. It's just this beautiful, magnificent, perfect horse. And then it kneels down. Right there, on the grass. It folds its front legs and lowers itself as if bowing, as if inviting the children. "Look!" one child squeals. "It wants us to ride it." They rush over, delighted. What an adventure! A wild horse that wants to be ridden. The first child clambers up onto the horse's back, and it doesn't move, it just waits patiently. "There's room," the child calls. "Come on!" A second child climbs up behind the first. The horse's back seems perfectly sized for two. Then a third child climbs on, and the horse's back extends. Not grows, it doesn't stretch. It extends, like it's unfolding, making room, creating space where there was none. The children laugh. This is amazing. This is like magic. A fourth child scrambles up, the back extends again. A fifth, a sixth, a seventh. 7 children now sit on the horse's back, which has somehow lengthened to accommodate them all. They're all giggling, squirming, all amazed. Only young Dougal remains on the shore. The smallest one, the youngest. He's 6 years old. His mother had told him stories about this. Old stories. Warnings about the water. About things that look like horses but aren't. About touching things you shouldn't touch. "Dougal, come on!" his friends call. "There's room, there's plenty of room." But Dougal hesitates. Something feels wrong. The horse's eyes. Are they kind? Or is there something else in there? Something cold? "Don't be scared," his sister calls. She's up there too, on the horse's back. "It's friendly, see?" Dougal takes a step forward, his hand reaches out almost without thinking just to stroke the horse's nose. Just to touch. His finger makes contact with the horse's muzzle, and it sticks. Dougal pulls back, but his finger won't come free. It's glued to the horse's face, like his skin is fused with it. "I'm stuck," he says. His voice is small and frightened. The horse turns its head slowly, looks at him with those eyes, and Dougal sees what's really in there. Not kindness. This is hunger. The horse roars, not a whinny, not a neigh, a roar, deep, guttural, inhuman, the sound that a predator makes. It surges to its feet, and the 7 children on its back suddenly realise they can't get off. Their legs are stuck firmly to its sides, their hands are glued to its mane. They're part of it now, and they all start screaming. The Kelpie wheels toward the loch, and Dougal is dragging along. His finger is still stuck fast to its face, his little legs scrambling to try and keep up. "Let go!" his sister screams from the horse's back. "Dougal, just let go!" But he can't. His finger is stuck fast. He's being pulled towards the water, his feet dragging in the grass. The horse is at the water's edge now. The 7 children on its back are shrieking, crying, begging. Some of them have realised what's about to happen. Some are still far too young to even understand. Dougal sees the water rising up. In seconds, the Kelpie will plunge in, and he will be dragged under. He'll drown, or worse. His free hand scrabbles at his belt. His father gave him a knife, a small one for whittling and for cutting rope, and for emergencies. Dougal yanks the knife out, raises it up, and in one desperate motion, he cuts off his own finger. The blade goes right through the skin, right through the bone. Blood sprays everywhere. The pain is blinding, white hot, all-consuming. But he's free. Dougal falls backward onto the grass, clutching his maimed hand, blood pouring between his fingers. He watches through tears and agony as the Kelpie, with his severed finger still stuck to the front of its muzzle, plunges deep into the loch. 7 children scream as they hit the water, and then silence. The loch swallows them whole, barely a splash, just smooth water as if nothing even disturbed it. Dougal lies on the grass, sobbing, bleeding, all alone. The search parties found nothing at first. The loch was dragged, divers went down, prayers were said. 3 days later, things started washing up on shore. Entrails, intestines, pieces of organ meat, strips of flesh, just enough to identify 7 children, all of them. The Kelpie had eaten everything else. The bones, the muscle, the skin, gone, devoured in the cold depth of that loch. Only the parts it didn't want, the bits it spat back out, came to the shore. 7 families buried what little remained. And Dougal? Well, he lived. He grew up with a missing finger on his right hand, a permanent reminder he never went near water ever again. Never for the rest of his life. But he told this story over and over to anyone who would listen. Don't touch the beautiful horse, no matter how gentle it seems. Don't touch the beautiful horse, because once you do, you can never let go. But there are other Kelpie stories, hundreds of them, scattered across Scotland. River Cannon, Scottish Highlands, midday. A group of men are working in a field near the river. It's a hot day, exhausting work. They're looking forward to finishing heading home. At exactly noon, they hear a voice. It echoes across the water, deep, resonant, almost like it's coming from the river itself. The hour has come, but not the man. The workers freeze. They look at each other. Did everybody hear that? The hour has come, but not the man. They turn towards the river. There's something standing in the shallow ford. A massive black horse. Water dripping from its mane. It wasn't there a minute ago. As they watch, the horse lowers its head and snorts, and then plunges into the deep water. Gone. Vanished beneath the surface. The men just stand there all confused. What did that mean? The hour has come, but not the man? 5 minutes later, they hear hoofbeats. A stranger comes galloping down the road towards the ford. The river crossing, he's moving fast, clearly in a hurry. Wait! The workers shout out. Stop! Don't cross! But the stranger either doesn't hear or simply doesn't care. He urges his horse faster, heading straight for the ford. Wait! There's something in the water! They yell. Something said the hour has come. The stranger laughs and just waves them off. Superstitious fools. He rides into the ford. His horse enters the shallow water and takes 1 step, 2 steps, 3. And then, the water's not shallow anymore. The water explodes upwards. Something black and massive erupts from beneath. The kelpie, jaws wide, eyes blazing. It seizes the stranger's horse by the neck and drags both horse and rider under. The water churns, thrashes, red foam bubbles up to the surface, and then calm. It's just the river, flowing peacefully, as if nothing ever happened. The workers stand on the bank in stunned silence. The hour had come, and so had the man. The kelpie had called him, and he answered. There are ways to escape a kelpie. Very few ways, very dangerous. If you realise what it is before you touch it, just run. They're faster than horses, but they can't leave the water for very long. Get to high ground. Get to iron, because kelpies hate iron. If you've already touched it and you're stuck, well, you have to do what Dougal did. Cut yourself free, whatever it takes. A finger, a hand, a chunk of skin. You will survive that, but you won't survive the water. If you can get a bridle on a kelpie, a real bridle, blessed with iron in it, legend says that you can control it, force it to work for you. Some old stories tell of men who enslaved kelpies and made them pull ploughs or haul stones. But you can never trust them. Never turn your back. The moment you remove that bridle, they'll kill you. And if you're already in the water being dragged down, well, there's no escape. Not anymore. You're in their world now. The cold, the dark, the deep, and the kelpie is so hungry. Some legends say that kelpies are the spirits of drowned people, those who died in the water and cannot leave. They're trapped there forever, hungry, forever jealous of the living who walk on dry land. Others say they're older than that, older than Scotland itself, primordial water spirits from when the lochs were new and the world was wild. But everyone agrees on one solid thing. They are patient. A kelpie can wait for years, for decades, for centuries. It doesn't matter. Eventually, someone will come to the water, someone will see a beautiful horse, and someone will reach out. And then the kelpie will feed. Parents in Scotland still tell their children about the kelpies. It's not just folklore, it's a safety lesson. Don't go near deep water alone. Don't trust strange animals. Don't touch things you don't understand. Because Scotland's lochs are deep and cold and dark. And every year, people disappear in them. Swimmers who vanish without a trace. Hikers who slip and fall. Children who wander too close. The official reports say drowned, accidental, tragic. But the old people, the ones who grew up hearing all these stories, they look at those deep, still waters and they wonder, how many kelpies are still down there? How many of them are waiting? How many beautiful horses will appear on misty mornings by loch sides, kneeling gently, inviting? And how many people will touch them before they remember the warning? The kelpie, Scotland's most beautiful nightmare. 8 children learned the hard way, 7 never came home. And somewhere in Scotland tonight, beside a loch that you could probably name, a horse stands in the shallows, waiting. Just waiting. But don't touch it. In Greyfriars Kirkyard in the heart of Edinburgh, there's a section that's kept locked, not to keep vandals out, but to keep something in. Since 1999, over 500 people have been attacked in this graveyard. 180 of them were knocked unconscious. Visitors have suffered broken bones, burns, bruises, scratches, bites. Women have had their hair yanked so hard they've been pulled off their feet. Men have been shoved into walls with enough force to crack ribs. Paranormal investigators call it the Mackenzie poltergeist. Tour companies have documented every attack. Photographs show the injuries on real people, witnessed by real crowds. This isn't legend, this isn't folklore passed down through generations. This is happening now, right now, tonight probably, as we speak, and it all started with one man's cruelty 350 years ago. Let's go back to 1679 in Edinburgh. Sir George Mackenzie is one of the most powerful men in Scotland, Lord Advocate, the King's lawyer, brilliant legal mind, elegant speaker and respected scholar, and an absolute monster. King Charles II has ordered the suppression of the Covenanters, Presbyterians who refuse to accept the King as head of the Church. They believe church and state should be separate. They hold illegal prayer meetings in fields and on hillsides. They won't bend the knee to the King. And Mackenzie is tasked with breaking them. He goes about it with enthusiasm. Torture becomes routine. Trials are a formality. Mackenzie prosecutes with cold efficiency, sending thousands to execution. His legal arguments are brilliant, ironclad, merciless. He never loses. Behind closed doors, he personally oversees interrogations, thumbscrews, the boot, a device that crushes feet and ankles into splinters, sleep deprivation, starvation. By the time the killing times end in 1688, approximately 18,000 Covenanters are dead, executed, tortured, imprisoned, or driven into exile. Edinburgh gives Mackenzie a nickname that will stick forever: Bloody Mackenzie. Bloody Mackenzie. And he's proud of it. In his writings, he defends every action. They were traitors, he argues, heretics. They got what they deserved. June 22nd of 1679, the day after the Battle of Bothwell Brig, the government forces have crushed the Covenanter rebellion. 1,200 prisoners are marched through Edinburgh streets, exhausted, wounded and starving. The citizens stare, some weep, some spit on them. The prisoners are herded into a corner of Greyfriars Kirkyard and locked in. An open-air prison surrounded by high walls. There's no shelter, there's no sanitation, it's just bare open ground. This is one of the world's first concentration camps. Mackenzie himself designed these conditions. Each prisoner receives 4 ounces of food per day, just enough to keep them barely alive. Water is irregular and they sleep on the ground in Scottish weather. June rains, then July heat, then the bitter cold of the approaching winter. The rules are simple. No movement after dark. If you move at night, the person sleeping next to you will be executed at dawn. So they lie there, in the dark, in the cold, in their own filth, barely breathing, too terrified to shift position, too terrified to even shiver. Disease spreads, dysentery, typhus. Men die every day and their bodies are left among the living because moving them would count as movement after dark. Some prisoners are executed as examples. Some are transported as slaves to the American colonies, many dying on the ships. Some are released, broken shells of the men they once were. By the time the prison is emptied 5 months later, the exact death count is unknown. Hundreds, certainly, maybe even more. The ground is soaked with their suffering. May 8th, 1691. Sir George Mackenzie dies in his sleep, aged 59. He's given a lavish funeral befitting his station. His body is placed in an elegant mausoleum, the Black Mausoleum it's called, right at the edge of Greyfriars Kirkyard, right next to the Covenanters' prison. The man who tormented them, who designed their suffering, who sent them to slow deaths, is now buried 50 feet from where they died. And he goes to his grave proud and unrepentant. In his final writings he defends everything. He served the king, he served the law, and he did his duty. The dead Covenanters might disagree. So fast forward now to modern times, it's 1999 and it's a cold night in late December. A homeless man is desperate. Edinburgh streets are brutal in the winter and he needs shelter. So he spots Greyfriars Kirkyard. It's usually locked up at night, but one section has a gap in the fence. He squeezes through and he looks around. Rows of tombs, old mausoleums, ancient stones, and there, the Black Mausoleum. The door has rusted hinges. It's been sealed for years. But maybe... So he gives it a push, and the door groans open. Inside it's pitch black. The man lights a match and sees stone steps leading down into darkness, a lower burial chamber. It'll be dry down there, and protected from the wind. He starts down the steps carefully, and then his foot hits something that isn't there. The floor gives way, the match goes out, and he crashes through rotten wood into a hidden ossuary below. It's a pit full of bones, old bones, forgotten bones, bones that have been sealed in darkness for centuries. He finds himself now lying in a pile of skeletons. The man screams, he scrambles up the stairs, bursts out of the mausoleum and runs. He's still screaming when he crashes through the kirkyard gate and doesn't stop running until he's blocks away. Behind him in the Black Mausoleum, something stirs. Something that's been sleeping for over 308 years. 1 week later, a tour group is doing an evening ghost walk through Greyfriars. They're standing near the Black Mausoleum and the guide is telling them about Bloody Mackenzie. The woman at the back of the group suddenly gasps. Her hand flies to her neck. "Something's just touched me," she says. She's pale and she's shaking. The guide comes closer. "Are you alright?" "No, something grabbed my throat." The woman pulls her scarf down. There are red marks on her neck, fresh, angry. 5 distinct finger marks, like someone had grabbed her from behind and squeezed hard. But no one was behind her. Everyone was standing up front facing the guide. The marks darken over the next few minutes, turning into bruises, deep bruises. She'll wear them now for 2 weeks. That's the first attack, but it certainly won't be the last. At first, it's just the small things, cold spots that follow people around, the feeling of being watched, but within months the attacks become more physical. A man touring the kirkyard is standing near the Covenanters' prison when he feels a sharp pain in his ribs. He quickly lifts up his shirt, 3 long scratches across his side, bleeding, fresh, like claws had just raked across his skin. A woman feels her hair yanked from behind with such force that she's pulled backwards, stumbling. When she turns, there's no one there, but when she gets home, she finds a bald patch on the back of her head. Her hair has been ripped out by the roots. A teenage boy is exploring near the Black Mausoleum when something shoves him hard. He flies forward and crashes into a gravestone and blacks out. When he wakes up, his nose is broken and he has concussion. People start reporting bites, actual physical bite marks appearing on their arms, their shoulders, their legs, human-shaped bites, deep enough to break the skin. And then, people start collapsing. So by 2003, tour companies start keeping records. 180 people have been knocked unconscious in that section of the graveyard. Now they've not fainted, they've been knocked out cold. EMTs have been called dozens of times. People go down like they've been hit in the head with a bat, and they don't wake up for minutes, sometimes even longer. Some recover with no memory of what's happened. Some wake up screaming. Some have burn marks on their skin, raised red welts in the shape of hands, as if they've been grabbed by something burning hot. In 2004, a woman collapses near the Black Mausoleum. When paramedics arrive, she's unconscious. Her skin is ice cold and she's not breathing properly. They rush her immediately to the hospital and she wakes up 3 hours later with no memory of the attack, but with mysterious bruises covering her arms and upper torso. The tour guides start warning people. If you feel sick, step back. If you feel dizzy, sit down. Do not enter the Covenanters' prison area if you have a heart condition. Because something in there is violent, something in there is angry, and it's not getting weaker, it's only getting stronger. At the turn of the millennium, in the year 2000, the owners of the tour company decided this has gone a bit too far. 500 attacks in a single year. Injuries are piling up, something has to be done. So they call a guy called Colin Grant, a local priest, experienced in blessings and spiritual cleansing. He agrees to perform an exorcism in the Covenanters' prison. Colin enters the area alone, carrying holy water and his Bible. The tour company waits outside. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then they hear him shouting, words of exorcism, prayers, commands. His voice rises, urgent and desperate, and then silence. Colin stumbles out, his face is grey and his hands are shaking. There's too many, he whispers. There's too many souls, it's too much suffering. I just can't reach them all. And there's something else, something feeding on them, something dark. He refuses to go back in. 1 year later, Colin Grant is dead. A heart attack. He was only 48 years old, absolutely healthy with no prior health conditions. People whisper that maybe Mackenzie had killed him. 2003, another exorcist tries. This one brings a full team, 3 people, blessed salt, holy water, prayers in Latin. They perform the ritual at dawn when spiritual activity is supposedly its weakest. But it doesn't matter. Halfway through, one team member collapses and falls immediately unconscious. Another statistic. The second feels an overwhelming sense of dread and flees. The lead exorcist finishes the prayers alone, but he knows it hasn't worked. Whatever is in here, he tells the reporters, it's not leaving. It has a right to be here, and those men died in agony. Their rage has nowhere else to go. And Mackenzie is still here too. He is still punishing them. The prison never closed. Not really. 2004. Something even more disturbing starts happening. The activity begins spreading beyond the kirkyard. 4 houses that back onto Greyfriars, their gardens literally touch the kirkyard wall, start experiencing violent poltergeist activity. Dishes smash themselves against walls. Furniture moves. Doors slam with enough force to crack the frames. Residents hear footsteps in empty rooms and laughter that isn't human. One family finds their kitchen destroyed one morning. Every single glass shattered, every plate broken, the table overturned. They'd heard nothing during the night. There was no crash, there was no sound. They just woke up to utter destruction. Another resident reports seeing a dark figure standing in their hallway. Tall, male, wearing old-fashioned clothes. When they turn on the light, it's gone, but they smell something. The unmistakable scent of decay. 2 families move out. The houses stand empty for months because, well, no one wants to live there. Whatever is in that kirkyard is no longer contained. In 2003, the tour company's offices catch fire. There's no electrical fault that can be found. There's no explanation. The fire investigators rule it as suspicious, but they can't determine a cause. It burns hot and fast, destroying years of documentation, tour schedules and records. One investigator mentions something odd. The fire seemed to have started in the room where they kept the archives about Mackenzie, about the attacks, about the history, as if something wanted those records destroyed. By 2010, researchers have documented over 500 distinct attacks. They've noticed patterns. The violence spikes during certain times of year, particularly around the dates connected to the Covenanters' persecution. April and June are the worst months. Women are attacked more frequently than men. Young people more than old. Skeptics more than believers. It's as if whatever is there targets specific types of people, chooses its victims. And physical contact with the Black Mausoleum seems to trigger stronger responses. People who touch the walls, or who peer through the windows, or who try to enter, well, they get the worst of it. One man pressed his hand against the mausoleum door and reported his palm was burning. When he pulled it away, there was a red handprint backwards, as if something had pressed from the inside against his hand, and the burn took weeks to heal. So what about evidence? Well, photographs exist, hundreds of them. Bruises, scratches, burns. The injuries are real and documented by medical professionals. There's video footage that shows people collapsing with no physical cause, falling like puppets with cut strings. Audio recordings capture strange sounds, breathing, footsteps, voices speaking words that can't quite be made out. Electromagnetic field meters go haywire in certain spots. Temperature guns record drops of 20 to 30 degrees in mere seconds. This isn't anecdotal, this isn't hearsay, this is documented, measured, photographed. Something is in that kirkyard, and it's violent. So, today, right now, tours still run through Greyfriars Kirkyard. I myself have been on a few of them. The Covenanters prison area is locked off, but tour groups can peer through the gates. Some companies still offer night tours with special access. And the attacks still continue. In 2018, a woman was hospitalised after collapsing near the prison, massive bruising across her back as if she'd been beaten with no physical cause. In 2020, despite COVID lockdowns and no tours running, security cameras caught something. Movement in the Covenanters prison area. A dark shape, man-sized, walking the perimeter. When security checked, there was no one there. The gates were locked from the outside. In 2023, a tour guide reported feeling ill near the Black Mausoleum. She had to sit down, and when she looked at her arms, they were covered in scratches that hadn't been there just mere minutes before. As I've said, the current count is over 500 documented attacks. 180 plus people knocked unconscious, multiple hospitalisations, 2 exorcisms failed, and 1 priest dead. And George Mackenzie still lies in that mausoleum, unrepentant, 50 feet from the men he tortured to death. The prison never closed, the suffering never ended, and the attacks, well, they're still not stopping. The Mackenzie poltergeist still active, still violent, still keeping score. If you do visit Edinburgh, you can take a wee tour. You can stand at those gates, you can look into the Covenanters prison. But whatever you do, do not touch the Black Mausoleum. Because Bloody Mackenzie is still there. He is still punishing, and he's still hungry. And he's never, ever satisfied. So that's it for this wee video. If you've managed to stick around till the end, I just want to thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. Every single view, like or comment means the world to me. Subscribe. Stay safe out there, folks. Tell someone you love them, and above all else, remember, keep smiling.